So first and foremost, I want to give all praises to the Most High Yahweh, and we do so in the name of Mashiach Yahweh Shah. I pray that this lesson is further edifying to whoever it comes across. So in the last lesson, we exposed the true origins of Halloween, which opened the door to the identity of both the Druids and Celtics. However, due to that lesson being focused on mythology, instead of making this video part 2, we will make this video an entirely new series dealing with the identities of nations and people groups, which will help clear up misunderstandings often taught by fake Israelite elders, Christians, and the unlearned in general. With this being said, today we will hyper-focus on the Druid and Celtic people groups, and in doing so we will prove that many of those claiming Irish, Scottish, British, Celtic, and Druidic ancestry all descend from the Israelites, better known as the Blacks, Natives, and Latinos. Lord willing, whoever has ears to hear is further edified. Now to start, many need to understand that the Caucasian persuasion isn't the only group of people to have ever lived in Europe. For example, black people lived in Europe as royals during the 16th century, which means black people from Africa once controlled large sections of Europe, proving not everyone in Europe had European origins. But how does this all connect to the Israelites, Druids, and Celtics? Well, to answer this question, history shows us Phoenician-speaking people colonized the British Isles in early times. And due to the Israelites speaking the Phoenician dialect while being the seafaring people, it's possible these Phoenician-speaking people were actually Israelites. Furthermore, we are told the Bible speaks of Israelites sending ships to Tarshish, which is another name for Spain, and we can find this in 2 Chronicles 9 and 21, where it shows Israelites being sent to build a colony in Tarshish, only to return every 3 years with supplies for their king. Also, Isaiah 60 and 9 shows Israelites will come from the land of Tarshish when the nation is saved. And for this to happen, Israelites would have to already be there. And to further the point, this can even be seen in history through various images of black Israelite kings found in Spain and other European areas. Now moving forward, King Solomon's navy is said to have sailed with Phoenician people groups during various expeditions. And in doing so, Israelites were one of many foreigners to colonize Spain and Britain, making it easy for these people to slowly spread throughout Europe, leaving traces of the Hebrew faith in their wake. And due to us proving the Israelites are blacks, natives, and Latinos in multiple lessons, this means the people who colonized Europe in this time would have either been black, native, or Latino, not European. But now let's continue by figuring out why these Israelites chose to come to Europe in the first place. So when we dig deeper, we come across a lengthy article from originsofnations.org, and it reads, "The Hebrew-Celtic connection, language, cultural, and religious ties, a missing link in fulfilled prophecy." In the 8th century BC, the Assyrian Empire was at its peak, and its armies threatened the nations of the eastern Mediterranean seaboard, including Israel. The Assyrians were a brutal, fearsome people and the most terrible, perhaps in all the earth's history. Conquered lands were literally plundered of everything of value, even people, who were taken to slavery in foreign lands. The wall murals of the Assyrians, some of which now bedeck the British Museum in London, depict scenes of horrible savagery and torture. Men were sometimes skinned alive or impaled on poles to slowly die outside the gates of a city. Famed archaeologist Sir Austin Henry Layard rediscovered the unearthed ancient Assyrian cities and graphically described the scenes on the wall murals he found. In his words, captives were stretched naked at full length on the ground, and whilst their limbs were held apart by pegs and cords, they were being flayed alive. Beneath them were other unfortunate victims undergoing abominable punishments. The brains of one were apparently being beaten out with an iron mace, whilst an officer held him by the beard. A torturer was wrenching the tongue out of the mouth of a second wretch who had been pinioned to the ground. The bleeding heads of the slain were tied round the necks of the living, who seemed reserved for still more barbarous tortures. Inhabitants of Palestine in those days, which would have been Israelites, were well aware that Assyria would only too soon conduct a similar brutal warfare against the eastern shore of the Mediterranean. Would not large numbers of Israelites migrate westward by land and sea to find safety for themselves and for their families outside of the Assyrian sphere of influence? Historical evidence indicates that did indeed happen. The authoritative dictionary of Christ in the Gospels relates, large numbers of Israelites had been carried away captive by the Assyrians and Babylonians, but a much larger dispersion was due to voluntary immigration. Volume 1, page 692. So yes, more Israelites immigrated or migrated voluntarily out of Palestine than even the large number of those taken away in the Assyrian and Babylonian captivities. As it became clear that invasion and conquest by Assyria was imminent, Hebrews and Phoenicians immigrated westward to distant lands by the many hundreds of thousands, forming the foundation of European civilization. So as we know, The northern kingdom of Israel was held captive in Assyria, as it is written in 2 Kings 17:6. And this was the case until they fled into America, as it was recorded in 2 Ezra 13:40-46. So it will make sense that many fled Samaria entirely before the bulk of the northern kingdom was removed, and this explains how many Israelites found themselves in Europe under a Celtic identity, even though they are not a European people group. Moving forward, in part 2 of exploring the native languages, we expose how languages and people groups adapt and change as time moves forward. And due to this being the case, we should expect the Israelites that formed the base of modern European civilization to have evolved their languages, names, and customs to better fit those of the people around them while retaining the roots of their Hebrew tongue. With this being said, let's see if we can find this evolution among the Druidic or Gaelic and Celtic languages. So back to the article from originsofnations.org, and it reads, in 1772, General Charles Vallancey, a leading Irish scholar of the day, published his famous work, Essay on the Antiquity of the Irish Language, being a collation of the Irish with the Punic Hebrew language. In his opening remarks, he states, on a collation of the Irish with the Celtic, Punic, Phoenician, and Hebrew languages, the strongest affinity, nay, a perfect identity in very many words, will appear. It may therefore be deemed a Punic-Celtic compound. Vallancey continues, from the Hebrew proceeded the Phoenician. From the Phoenician, the Carthaginian, or Punic, was derived the Aeolian, Dorian, and Etruscan, and from these was formed the Latin. Of the Roman Saxon capital letters, the Irish used but 3. All the others bear a very great resemblance to the primitive Hebrew and Phoenician. Modern language scholars have confirmed that there is a definite connection between the Celtic and Hebrew, as we have shown in our tract, Hebrew and the English. So in simple words, here we are shown how even though multiple languages descend from the Hebrew, the Celtic language shares more similarities with earlier divergence such as the Punic and Phoenician. And though these languages don't automatically point to a Hebrew relation among nations, we are then told the written language of the Celtic people resembles the Hebrew more than any other in Europe, which led scholars to make the connection between the two languages. This is important due to this proving the Hebrews provided the roots of the Celtic language, just like any other group of ancestors would for their descendants. But to further the point, let's examine the passage from the book titled The Hebrew Identity of the Celtic Races.